December 11, 1950, 6:22 in the morning. On the east coast of Korea, 12 kilometers west of Hungnam Harbor, Lieutenant William Baxter was looking at a map. He had the coordinates of two strategic bridges in the Funchalin Pass. First bridge, 40 degrees 27 minutes 14 seconds north, 127 degrees 18 minutes 52 seconds east. Second bridge, 40 degrees 27 minutes 9 seconds north, 127 degrees 18 minutes 45 seconds east, 900 meters distance between them. Baxter's task was simple. As American and UN forces withdrew south, destroy one bridge to slow Chinese forces' pursuit. But Baxter misread the map. He mixed up the coordinates. He marked the wrong bridge. The engineer team blew up that bridge. 12 hours later, the truth was understood. The correct bridge was still standing. Chinese forces crossed that bridge. 10,000 American soldiers were left under siege. But at the same time, that 12-hour delay gave 100,000 civilians time to board evacuation ships. Baxter's mistake was a disaster. And at the same time, a miracle. But no one knows Baxter's name. The Hungnam evacuation was one of the most critical moments of the Korean War. In November 1950, General MacArthur's forces had advanced north, approaching the Chinese border. But on November 27, 300,000 Chinese soldiers entered the war. American and UN forces were shocked. Lines collapsed. Retreat began. In the north, around the Chosin Reservoir, 14,000 American Marines and 8,000 British, Turkish, and Korean soldiers were surrounded. In the south, Hungnam Harbor was the only exit point. If Hungnam fell, all forces would be captured. Or they would die. The evacuation plan was complex. Naval forces sent 193 ships to Hungnam. They would carry soldiers. They would carry equipment. And for the first time after the war, they would also carry civilians. Because when Chinese forces moved south, North Korean civilians were in danger. Especially Christians. Especially those who were pro-South. An estimated 100,000 civilians had taken refuge in Hungnam. Naval forces pledged to take them too. But time was limited. Buying time for the evacuation was an engineering problem. Chinese forces were advancing at 40 kilometers per day. They were 10 days away from Hungnam. But this speed could be slowed. By destroying bridges. By closing roads. By blocking passes. Each destroyed bridge bought several hours. Because Chinese engineers had to repair the bridge or build a temporary bridge. Funchalin Pass was the most critical point. A mountainous pass. A narrow valley. 2 bridges. If these bridges were destroyed, Chinese forces would lose days. Maybe weeks. Lieutenant Baxter was responsible for this task. He was 26 years old. He was not an engineer. He was a logistics officer. But due to personnel shortage, bridge demolition planning had been given to him. Baxter knew how to read maps. He knew coordinate calculation. But he was tired. He had not slept for 3 days. He was freezing. -28 degrees. His hands were shaking. His eyes were blurry. And on the map, there were 2 bridges. Both at similar coordinates. Only a few seconds difference. Baxter needed to mark the first bridge. Because the first bridge was on the main road. The second bridge was on the side road. The main road was the road used by Chinese forces. The side road was rarely used. But when Baxter was reading the coordinates, he made a mistake. Instead of 40 degrees 27 minutes 14 seconds, he wrote 40 degrees 27 minutes 9 seconds. 5 seconds difference. On the map, 900 meters. The engineer team went to the coordinates Baxter gave to the second bridge and blew it up. The explosion was successful. The bridge was completely destroyed. The engineer team reported, "Target destroyed." Baxter breathed a sigh of relief. He had completed his mission. Or so he thought. But 12 hours later, reconnaissance aircraft reported Chinese forces are passing through Funchalin Pass. The main bridge is still standing. Baxter checked the map again. His face went pale. The wrong bridge had been destroyed. The correct bridge was standing. And Chinese forces were using that bridge. Baxter went to his commander. "Sir, I made a mistake." The commander, Colonel George Drake, looked at him. "What mistake?" Baxter explained. Drake's face changed. "You blew up the wrong bridge." Baxter lowered his head. "Yes, sir." Drake slammed the table. "Do you know what you did? Chinese forces will now arrive here 12 hours earlier. 12,000 of our soldiers are still in the north. The evacuation is not yet complete. You just killed thousands of people." But in reality, the situation was more complex. Because if that wrong bridge had not been destroyed, something else would have happened. The side road was being used by civilian evacuation convoys. 100,000 civilians were fleeing southeast. Not on the main road, but on the side road. Because the main road was full of military convoys. Civilians had been given the side road. If the bridge on the side road had remained standing, half the civilians would not have reached Hungnam. Because Chinese forces were also coming on the side road. A small unit. But enough to stop the civilian convoy. When the side bridge was destroyed, that Chinese unit stopped. Could not cross. It gave the civilians 12 hours. And those 12 hours saved the lives of 50,000 civilians. At the same time, the main bridge remained standing. Chinese main forces crossed that bridge. But they crossed 12 hours without delay. Meaning they arrived at Hungnam 12 hours earlier than planned. This was a disaster for the evacuation. Because soldiers had not yet boarded ships. Equipment had not yet been loaded. The units defending the harbor were not ready. When Chinese forces came to 10 kilometers outside Hungnam, the evacuation was 60% complete. The remaining 40% was still in the city. 12,000 soldiers. 6,000 tons of equipment. And 30,000 civilians. The situation was critical. The Naval Forces Commander, Admiral James Doyle, decided they would accelerate the evacuation. Ships would be overloaded. Safety protocols would be ignored. Each ship would carry twice the people. The risk was great. But the alternative was captivity or death. Ships loaded continuously for 24 hours. Soldiers ran onto ships. Equipment was left on shore. Priority was people. From December 11th to December 24th, during the 13-day evacuation, 114,000 soldiers and 105,000 civilians were evacuated. A total of 219,000 people. A naval evacuation of this scale had never been seen in history. The Dunkirk evacuation in World War II was 338,000 people. But Dunkirk lasted 8 days and was only a 30-kilometer sea crossing. Hungnam lasted 13 days and was a 200-kilometer sea journey. And in Hungnam there were not only soldiers but also civilians. Baxter's mistake was part of this evacuation. The wrong bridge was destroyed, the correct bridge remained. Chinese forces came early, civilians came late. 12,000 soldiers were rescued at the last moment. 1,200 soldiers froze to death in the north, because there were no ships left for them. 50,000 civilians safely reached Hungnam via the side road. 10,000 civilians were stranded in the north. Baxter's mistake killed some, saved others. And no one knew which group they were in. After the evacuation was completed, Baxter was court-martialed. Charge: dereliction of duty, providing wrong coordinates, leading to strategic error. The trial lasted 3 days. Witnesses were heard. Reports were read. Baxter's mistake was documented. He had no defense. I misread the map. I was tired. I'm sorry. This defense was not legal. But it was honest. The court panel reached a verdict. But before rendering judgment, a report came from the civilian evacuation commander. The report said, if the bridge on the side road had not been destroyed, civilian convoys would have been caught by Chinese forces. An estimated 50,000 civilians would have died or been captured. Because the bridge was destroyed, these civilians were saved. Therefore, Lieutenant Baxter's mistake unintentionally saved 50,000 lives. The court panel evaluated this report. Debated. One officer asked, but at the same time, he put 12,000 soldiers at risk. 1,200 soldiers died. How is this considered saving? Another officer replied, in war, every decision kills someone, saves someone. Baxter's decision was not intentional. He was making a mistake. But the result was net gain, not net loss. A third officer added. But there is a discipline violation. Misreading a map is unacceptable. He had training. He knew his duty. Fatigue is not an excuse. Finally, the court announced its decision. Lieutenant Baxter was found guilty of dereliction of duty. Punishment: reduction in rank, monthly pay cut, reprimand. But no prison. No discharge from the army. Because there was no intent. And the result was unintentionally positive. Baxter remained a lieutenant. But his military career froze. He could not be promoted. He lost his prestige. But he stayed in the army. Because the army needed him. There was a shortage of logistics officers. The war continued. Baxter served in Korea throughout 1951. But he was never again assigned to bridge demolition duties. He worked in logistics depots. Quietly. Invisibly. After returning from Korea, he left the army. He went into civilian life. He worked for a construction company. He retired. When he died, he was 82 years old. 100 people attended his funeral. None of them knew about Hungnam. None of them knew about the wrong bridge. Baxter never talked about that day with anyone throughout his life. Because there was nothing to talk about. He had made a mistake. People had died. People had been saved. Which was because of him, no one knew. Maybe neither. Maybe both. The Hungnam evacuation is considered one of the most successful operations in American military history. 219,000 people were saved. Casualties were minimal. Logistics planning was excellent. But part of that planning was a mistake. And that mistake was one of the reasons the plan succeeded. Because the plan was not perfect. The plan contained error. And the error produced an unexpected result. Sometimes bad. Sometimes good. Sometimes both. In war, every decision is a roll of the dice. You cannot know the outcome. You only know the intent. Baxter intended to destroy the correct bridge. But he destroyed the wrong bridge. His intent was correct. The result was mixed. Good for some. Bad for some. History found Baxter guilty. Because he made a mistake. But history also owes Baxter. Because his mistake saved tens of thousands of lives. This paradox is the nature of war. The winner is right. The loser is guilty. But sometimes the winner is the one who made a mistake. And the loser is the one who did right. December 11, 1950, Baxter looked at a map and misread it. 900 meters difference. 5 seconds coordinate error. And 12 hours delay. That delay led to the death of 1,200 soldiers. And the same delay saved the lives of 50,000 civilians. The math is not simple. Morality is not simple. War is never simple. Baxter never knew until the end of his life, was the mistake he made a disaster or a miracle? Maybe both. Maybe neither. Just a map. Just a coordinate. Just a delay. And a small misreading that changed the direction of history. 219,000 people were saved at Hungnam. But no one remembers Baxter's name. Because heroes are remembered. Mistakes are forgotten. Baxter was both. Both hero. Both mistake. And no one knew.